Division brings together a community of schools on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Inninewak, and Dakota. Our division is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis, and we recognize that Manitoba is also the traditional land of the Anishinaabe and Dene. And for those of you that we are welcoming, we make this acknowledgement at all our celebrations and events and at the start of all our board meetings and most of our parent councils and school events as well. So by way of introductions, to allow you to put some faces to names, I would ask these folks to just stand and give a wave. We have trustees from the board in the room tonight. Trustee Chris Sigurdsson as vice chair, Trustee Francine Champagne, Trustee Darlene Garrier, who is at the back, Pam Kolachuk, Irene Nordheim, and Chapala Simoniola. I believe that Trustee Turner and Trustee Palmquist are en route, so we will recognize them when they arrive. Also, Christian Michalik, the Superintendent and CEO of the Louis Riel School Division, Jamie Rudnicki, our Secretary Treasurer, Assistant Superintendent Jeff Anderson, Michelle Jean-Paul, and Marlene Murray. Assistant Superintendent Darcy Cormack was unable to join us this evening. Assistant Secretary Treasurer Jocelyn Peters, I'm not sure if she is here this evening. Online, welcome Jocelyn, hello. Clark Hagan, Director of Information Technology Systems. Ron Cadez, Director of School and Classroom Supports at the front. Jordana Greenberg might also be online, Director of Staff Services. And Amabir Bandari, Director of Facilities Maintenance and Transportation, is also joining us online. So just the way the evening is going to flow, some introductions, a little bit about our strategic priorities, and some acknowledgements that we use on a regular basis to keep us as a board and senior leadership team grounded when we are having some discussions. Trustee Sigurdsson, in his capacity as vice chair, and our secretary treasurer are then going to walk all of us through what the budget for the coming year looks like in draft form. Christian is going to share some information about the thought exchange, which I hope a lot of you participated in as a way to assist us with a temperature check and gathering some information from our community. And then we're going to take a short break before we come back for some questions. And before we proceed, and as I often do, I neglected to introduce and welcome a few folks. Councillor Brian Mays is here this evening. I saw you come in. I don't know where you sat. There you are. And also welcome to MLAs Nello Altamere and Andrew Smith.
I'm Nello.
Thank you. So again, welcome to all of you. The board is thrilled that you carve some time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening, all of you here and joining us online. And this is your board, newly elected in October, and 5 new faces who hit the ground running and who hadn't really had a chance to stop, as any of them here will attest tonight. So as I mentioned, there are a number of statements that are important to us as a school division and that we reference and use on a regular basis. Our motto, which is thriving learners and flourishing communities. Our vision statement, which is to provide a safe, inclusive, and engaging environment where personal and collective learning are valued and each one of us reaches our full potential. And our mission, which is to provide a safe, inclusive, and engaging environment where personal and collective learning are valued and each one of us reaches our full potential. The multi-year strategic plan that we started to develop and shared with our community in the spring of 2019 has really provided us an opportunity to ensure that all of the work, all of the needs of our community, everything that we value and believe and want is moving, that we are moving towards the goals on a regular basis. And what it did was it laid out a roadmap of what our community could expect and what our learners would experience as they navigated their K-12 journey with everybody that was there to support them. And you'll recall that we looked to the Indigenous Circle of Courage and its principles in creating a whole learner approach to education. And throughout the last 4 years, and as we look to our next multi-year strategic plan, we've shared our progress on a regular basis with our community, with our education partners, and with those in government. And we have always waded out into community to ensure that the voices of everyone that we serve, everyone that we assist along the way, our students, our families, our teachers, our staff, our administration, and everybody in our community has an opportunity to bring voice to what we're doing. So this just looks at it a different way. It shows you some of the benchmarks that we are using in order to check our progress along the way. And we will very soon be sharing further with you where we are in that journey as we, as I mentioned, look to craft a multi-year strategic plan that will carry us from 2023 on. So we're going to share lots of numbers with you this evening. You'll notice it has been a number of years since we've been able to do this in person. You're going to notice a little bit of a different look to the presentation. But at the end of the day, what we want you to understand is the pressures that we're navigating, the dollars that we have to help us through some of those, and talking lots about what the future holds in Riel. And there is lots of good news to celebrate. And this time, I'm going to turn things over to Trustee Sigurdsson and to our Secretary Treasurer, Jamie Rudnicki, and they will walk you through what that looks like.
Thank you, Sandy, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out on this evening. It's nice to see everyone in person and everyone who's joining us online. Pardon me, will I do this? Here we are. It's going to be my role tonight to talk you through a lot of the numbers and show some of these graphs, and then I'll be assisted by our finance person, Jamie Rudnicki, who'll come and help me out for a bit. So we have here, this is the funding that we are to receive for the 23-24 year. And now if you look at the first 4 rows, that is the funding that's generated from taxes by the provincial government and a small contribution from the federal government. The federal government does kick in a bit for French language programming. Rows 3 and 4 are what we call the TIG and the PTOG. Very awkward acronyms there, but those are just programs that have been around for a while that are an incentive to not raise the taxes or to keep taxes low, and that's money that comes from the provincial government as well. Then we have row 5, and that is funding collected by the City of Winnipeg on behalf of the school board to finance public education. So that's the big one there. That's the special requirement. Now, we've lost the ability to adjust our tax rates to bring in any more than that. So that's the number that we basically have to deal with. That's the money that's taken from the property owners in LRSD. Row 6 is funding we collect from other revenues. That includes things such as the lunch fees, and students from other divisions who choose to come to our school, we can get that that money. Now, there's also another important source of revenue at line 6, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit more later on because it becomes important. I think I have to go past here now. Nope, sorry. Can't make this go back. Yeah. Ah, good. Sometimes we have a clicker. I'm working off the keyboard here today. 7 and 8 are the sources of funding we received the last 2 years as part of the February funding announcement from February 2022 announcement. And this includes a lot of one-time funding. Now, we're pleased always to get any funding, but we also have to acknowledge that block funding in this way creates a great deal of uncertainty and distress. We've incorporated it into our lines there as to show the austerity that we've experienced for several years pre-pandemic and the insufficient funding in response to the pandemic. And then finally, in funding, we've received many years The funding that we've received for many years now has not been adequate to respond to the pressures we've been experiencing over a decade, and that's been exacerbated by the pandemic. Although the funding this year appears to be more predictable, it's still insufficient given the impacts of the austerity that preceded this year's announcement and the ongoing crisis caused by the pandemic. So now we move right. Now, this is an important thing. This is the International Student Program, or the ISP program. We decided about 15 years ago to set up our ISP program. A lot of other school divisions had been running it, but we've been going at it quite successfully. And we've also developed an adult educational program, or AEP, offerings from grade 9 to 12 and post-secondary vocational school, and that's done through ATC. And while I'm speaking of ATC, I should give a shout out to all these fine folks here who are live streaming and doing a great job setting us up for this presentation. So this slide illustrates that the revenues we're forecasting for 2023-24, the cost of running the program, and the surplus the programs are forecasted to generate. We will not return this. We will return to this later on in the presentation. Sorry. I want to highlight the important detail related to the staffing costs. As we talk about the international student program and what it costs, what we bring in, we really have to concentrate sometimes and show what it is it costs us in teachers. So the revenue pays that we get from the international students pays for 6.14 teacher FTE, that's full-time equivalent, in our schools. The adult education program revenue pays for 9 instructor FTE who deliver the program. We're constantly monitoring the needs of our program, both programs, to make sure that it's all balanced. The FTE is paid from the ISP revenue. So this is not paid for, these teachers are not paid from general revenue, they're paid from this program. So it's a very important program. Now, we'll move on to the next slide. And this is getting into the crux here, this is the draft budget. So you'll see that there's 2 big areas of expenditures. One is 16% of our expenditures are from supplies and services, and that's 35 million. And 84% of our expenditures are from staff. We very much value our staff. It's $186,529,733 of our spending goes to staff. All of that equals $221,591,886. Now our draft budget, again, this is the zeroing in at that one side, the supplies and services part. So let's look at that. You'll see this scale here shows what we're facing, the costs and the pressures that we're facing. This is for the non-salary side. You'll see inflation. Currently, the consumer price index is 7.7% for 2022. So we have a lot of pressure that's for all the things that we buy from inflation. We've also got transportation. Now, again, transportation, of course, is key. We're planning on building the new school, hoping to build a new school in Sage Creek, but meanwhile, there's a lot of busing. We have to bus kids around to the various schools. That is becoming more expensive. We have gas, we have more runs. All those things are adding up to our pressures on our costs. We've also experienced growing enrollment over the last decade, and the growth has been unprecedented. We've even seen 487 more students this year since September 29. An aging infrastructure, and we can't afford to attend to it because of the inadequate funding and unpredictability of the funding. Again, we'll get to that a little later, but the unpredictability problem. But we are looking for this year at a projected enrollment of 16,877 students. So we have to meet all of these pressures to for all of those students for that growing enrollment. Now, I'll pass it over to our Secretary Treasurer, Jamie Rudnicki, and he can explain the numbers much better than I can. I'm a lawyer, not an accountant. So I'll pass it over to Jamie.
Thank you very much, Trustee Sigurdsson. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so we're going to advance to the next slide. So as Trustee Sigurdsson mentioned, the total draft budget for supplies and services for the 2023-2024 school year is $35,062,143. This represents 16% of our total budget. Compared to the prior year, we have increased our budget of supplies and services by $4,235,893 or 13.74%. So for instructional clinical supplies and services, the increase of $781,691 or 11.22% from the prior year represents increased investments in programming and supports in our clinical services, instructional programs, diversity, equity, inclusion, and Indigenous departments. The increase reflects support for industrial arts, human ecology, music, and healthy living departments to address inflationary pressures experienced in delivering these programs. Additionally, we're continuing our commitment to support DEI initiatives like expanding our Aspire program from 4 to 6 sites, as well as investing additional dollars in supporting our Indigenous youth and families. When we talk about DEI, some think we're talking about something separate from clinical and instructional services, but it is quite the opposite. By having a diversity and equity lens, when looking at clinical and instructional needs, we are obligated to find ways to provide more clinical, educational, and teacher supports. For operations and maintenance, we are increasing our budget by $1,264,000 or 12.13% from the prior year. And this reflects ongoing inflationary pressures and ongoing costs of maintaining and operating our aging schools. The division has seen an above average increase compared to CPI in hydro and electricity, water, and insurance costs. The majority of the $1,264,000 in this budget line will solely be allocated to address just these additional costs. For transportation, we are proposing an increase of $1,068,140 or 25.44%. This increase gives consideration to an additional 12 bus routes, increase in fuel and insurance costs, and increase in our contractual obligation with First Canada, which is our third-party provider of transportation for some of our students. LRTA Professional Development Fund, there is no change in the upcoming year. This is a contractual obligation with the Riel Teachers Association that supports teacher learning in the division. There is currently no contractual change for the next school year. When the province settles collective bargaining with teachers, this obligation might change. For the staff learning fund, we're seeing a small increase of $16,553 or 2.83%. This reflects the proposed budgeted increase in FTE count for the division for the next school year. For information systems, the increase of $662,800 or 19.08% from the prior year represents increased costs to support hardware, software, and technology infrastructure in the division. The inflationary costs associated with hardware and software licenses has been astronomical, and as such, a large increase to maintain current support is required. For schools, which are supply services and PD, we are increasing the budget to by $210,209 or a 5.24% increase. This is based solely on enrollment increases. And so due to what Trustee Sigurdsson said earlier about how we've had increased projection in enrollment, this addresses those increases. And finally, infrastructure repairs and replacement. The increase of $232,500 reflects an increase in additional funding and is used to support larger infrastructure repairs, replacements, as well as the purchase of 2 new school buses and 1 maintenance vehicle that has passed their useful life. Now I'll pass it back over to Trustee Sigurdson. My apologies.
So you'll see, we had the earlier slide with the scale tipping to the pressure side. This is showing how we're undertaking to balance this scale by adding on to the cost side. And I thank Secretary Treasurer Rednicki for going through all the numbers, but just to summarize, supplies and services. We're talking about Aspire, that's our summer learning program. We're increasing our sites from 4 to 6, and that's very important for us from an equity lens. Transportation, we're adding 10 runs, 10 regular runs, 1 special needs bus, and a kindergarten run. Under operations, maintenance, and infrastructure, we're trying to return our spending on aging infrastructure back to pre-austerity levels while trying to meet the inflationary pressures resulting from the utility and insurance cost increases. So that leads us to the largest section of our budget, and this is staff, 84% of our budget. So let's focus on the biggest area of expenditures. And once again, we have our graph or our picture showing the pressures and the costs. So you can clearly see here the pressures that we're under. And this draft budget is a response to the ongoing impacts of the pandemic on learning outcomes, the declining mental health exacerbated by the pandemic, the growing enrollment that will result in growing class size if we don't address that growth. Added to these pressures is the hiring and retaining of staff, also exacerbated by the pandemic and chronic underfunding. Finally, another pandemic-related pressure is a higher number of student and staff absences and a commitment to address chronic student absences and substitute staff shortages. And again, I'll pass it back to Secretary Treasurer Rednicki to drill down to some of these numbers.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we don't have the mic stand to be going up and
Yeah.
down the entire time. So I appreciate that. So as Trustee Sigurdson mentioned in the previous slide, salary costs for the division for the 2023-2024 school year is budgeted to be $106,529,733. This represents 84% of our total budget. For teaching staff, the proposed budget factors an increase of 45.78 FTE and 6.11 FTE increase in our clinical support staff, and this is compared to last year's approved budget. These additions are to support additional enrollment growth and identified student needs in our classrooms. For non-teaching staff, the proposed budget factors an increase of 71.30 FTE, which is full-time equivalent, compared to our approved prior year's budget. The 71.30 FTE is broken out between an increase of 65.40 full-time equivalent increase in educational assistants and 5.9 full-time equivalent increase to our non-instructional support staff. Now I'll pass it back to Trustee Sigurdson.
You again. Good act here. So now we'll move on to, again, with the graph of the scale to show what we're looking at here. So additional staffing increases that we've made from September 2022 to February 2023 that were not budgeted for in March 2022 are included in these numbers for 2023 and 24, if that makes sense. We set out our budget with the number of teachers and staff that we thought we needed, but increased enrollment has bumped that up and we've had to add extra in. So this year we're including that in our numbers. And that includes 1 FTE support staff, 12.49 increased FTE teachers, 4.61 FTE clinical service people. That includes social workers, clinicians, physiotherapists, and 36.35 FTE full-time equivalent for EAs, because we need support for all of these people, and EAs are a very important part of our budget. So that leads us, as you can see again from the scale, we have a problem to solve. The expenditures that we need just to keep the school division going equal $221,591,886,000. The funding that we are projected to receive is $219,131,188. Now, when we've been faced with problems in the past of this nature, or in the last several years, we've had to look at cutting staff, we've had to look at cutting budgets, we had to look at cutting budgets related to supplies and services. We've lowered our number of people in the board office, but we simply can't continue down this path. We're at a situation now where we have to maintain our services, not with the pressures that confront us. So what's the answer to that? Here's the new balance scale. Unprecedented times and pressures require an unprecedented response. So for the first time in the 20-year history of LRSD, in January, the superintendent asked us to use $500,000 from our surplus to hire 6.49 teacher full-time equivalents, 4 EA full-time equivalents, 1 social worker, and that was in addition to the 6 teachers, 32.35 educational assistants, 4.61 clinicians, and 1 support worker that we'd already added. So we took that money out of the surplus that we have. In 2023, 2024, we're going to use $2,460,698 from our accumulated surplus to make up for the shortfall in funding. So this would be the first time that we're going to be going into an operating deficit. This is not a debt. We're not borrowing money. We're not going in the hole. This is money that we're having to use from our accumulated surplus, and we have that money because we've been good stewards of the money. We've taken care of the money, and we have that surplus that we can use for this. But it's very, very important that you all understand that this is not sustainable. We cannot be dipping into that surplus year after year, or we'll soon run out. We can't afford it. That said, the use of this surplus to make up for the shortfall in the annual funding, again, as I've said, it's not sustainable and it's very concerning. It's not something that we choose to do lightly. We should be using the accumulated surplus to enhance the living environment of the schools that are unsupported by the province. 2014, we used accumulated surplus to start retrofitting our schools with air conditioning. We've had to stop that. We built student commons spaces in some of our schools. We supported the creation of Murray Field at DCI, supported the renovations spaces at the René Delorme Center for a new equity-focused Abyssinian daycare. I could go on. There's a lot of things that we've used that surplus to improve things in our community, in our school division, but this year we're using it to balance the budget, and that's unfortunate. So we're using the surplus to keep the core operation going. So this is money just to keep going. There's no frills here. This cannot be sustained. Provincial funding must be equal to the needs of our schools. And this is the draft budget here, all summary of all that we've been talking about. You can see the lines. This shows that this is in the table, what I've just said. $221,591,886 is in total expenditures, which counts for a shortfall of $2,460,698. Secretary Treasurer Nikki will offer some more details about our surplus accumulated over the last 20 years. So I'll turn it back over to Jamie.
Thank you very much, Trustee Sigurdson. So we're going to shift our focus to accumulated surplus since we are going to be using surplus to partially fund our operations for next year. So accumulated surplus for the end of this current school year, so the 2022-2023 school year, it's anticipated to be $10,168,599. I'd like to highlight that this entire amount of accumulated surplus that has been generated over the past 20 years are from profits from the International Student Program and Adult Education Program. As Trustee Sigurdsson mentioned, the division historically used accumulated surplus generated from ISP and adult ed to enhance the lived environment in schools that are unsupported by the province. Unfortunately, this has to change. Funding has not been predictable or sustainable for several years. The uncertainty due to provincial austerity measures in education expressing itself in Bill 28 and Bill 64 has resulted in the division needing to support operations using generated ISP and adult ed income. If accumulated surplus wasn't available, like we have right here, we'd be faced with programming reductions and staff cuts similar to conversations other school divisions in the province are currently having with their communities. But that being said, we do have an accumulated surplus right now, and we are going to be dipping into it to help support operations. As Trustee Sigurdsson mentioned, this is not sustainable, and what we propose is to ask the province for a long-term solution to help us in a more predictable and sustainable funding model. I'd like to pass it over to Superintendent Michalik for the next section. Thank you.
All right, so on to the thought exchange. In December, on December 2nd, we launched a thought exchange. And the question was, as we plan for the 23-24 budget, what should we focus on to ensure the success of every student in the LRSD? So this thought exchange was open to everyone who cared to offer a thought. Students, parents, staff. We had 1,288 folks participate. It would be a deal to get 1,288 folks here this evening to share a thought. And so hence the thought exchange. And over the course of a couple of months, they've shared, well, almost 3 months now. They shared 1,069 thoughts. And this next little star symbol and number is important. So in thought exchange, you get to share a thought, but you're also encouraged to engage with others and their thinking and rate the thought of others. So even if you don't have a thought to share, you can simply let others know, let the community know how in agreement or in disagreement you are with the thoughts already being shared. So there's been this engagement and this interaction 54,186 times. And so again, to try to replicate that in real time this evening would be a deal. And so I'm trying to just convince us all that there is some value to leveraging this software before I get into what we learned. So 3 top thoughts were shared. The first one being we should focus on reasonable class sizes along with manageable classroom needs. Large class sizes with many needs do not help anyone to flourish. Indeed. And it's been at the heart of our conversation. Have we right-sized the classroom relative to the needs, relative to the growing enrollment, relative to the ongoing pressures of a pandemic? Another top thought was building on that first one, reasonable class sizes to give teachers and students the best opportunities to be successful. So again, before we consider anything else, teachers and educational assistants supported by teachers in the classroom and educational assistants, supported by their principal, maybe a vice principal, supported by their student services teachers, supported by their custodians, their clerical staff, and other casual staff that we bring in. That's the key. It's essential. And right now, we're saying we need to take from surplus over $2 million to make that, just meet that basic need for 23-24. And it should be disconcerting for us all. We need to find our way to more sustained and predictable funding that's adequate in meeting the needs. Finally, a third important thought here, more staffing is needed to support the growing academic and behavioral needs of students. And so we've seen a lot of commentary and thought exchange related to the trends that are all going in the wrong direction relative to the distress we see in schools in relationship to a pandemic we're still navigating, still struggling to find our way out of. So what the thought exchange also does is it allows us to compare and contrast opposing views. Not everyone in LRSD is on the same page. And so here we have a first slide illustrating this difference of opinion. We have an A side, a blue side. 465 people are on this side of the argument. And we have a B side, a green side. 60 people are together on this side of the argument. And they're having a debate between support and time. And what thought exchange attempts to do is to show us that although there are differences in opinion, there's somewhere where they meet. And that would be in the middle here, what's common to sides A and B. And so around this difference of opinion related to support and time, side A is saying getting more funding from the province because local investment is more, and I think the province should support it more, is a big thought shared by that side A. And side B would be in disagreement with this thought and would share a different thought that side A disagrees with. Stop wasting money on anti-racism bureaucrats. Our children are not racist. Spend money on educating children, not inventing problems to create jobs. If racism is such a big problem in the division, then any racist teachers or admin should be fired without cause immediately. And so this is an interesting thought, Why a DEI initiative? With respect to the bureaucrats, I guess we're a public sector entity, public schools are. And so I guess we're all bureaucrats in some way, shape, or form if we work in a public school. There are very few folks actually given sole responsibility for DEI and anti-racism because it's a collective responsibility. It's essentially everyone's responsibility in LRSD. Every single student, every single staff person. It's a commitment we hope is also in the hearts of every parent and guardian, and anyone who wants to be a part of LRSD's community. And it is this idea, I think, that I would desire along with the person who put together this thought. We want our children to be anti-racist. We want our children to be anti-racist because you're either a racist or you're an anti-racist. There is no in between. I repeat, you're either a racist or you're an anti-racist. There is no other option. And that's at the heart of the DEI initiative. It's an anti-racism initiative. It's acknowledging that if we don't have this as a focus, racism does slip in to our ways of doing and being. And so It's also connected to what's at the heart of agreement here. Students feeling confident as learners, confident doing math, confident reading and writing, expressing their thoughts, thinking critically. And we want this for everyone. And having an anti-racist stance is the expression of critical thinking, well-researched, someone who knows how to read and knows how to count. When we're not taking care of these things, the math is clear. All sorts of inequities take shape. All sorts of imbalance occurs. The most vulnerable are made more vulnerable, and the most privileged go on being more privileged at the expense for everyone else. Another difference of opinion was expressed through the thought exchange. Kindergarten versus behavior. On one side of the argument, 527 folks in blue, sharing thoughts about full-day kindergarten. And in disagreement, side B, 121 people in that little green bubble, not in agreement about full-day K, and suggesting that too much money is being spent babysitting behavioral issues and not enough on educating those students that go to school to become educated. And my response to this thought is, no one is babysitting anyone, not in a public school. No. Responding to the distress in our schools at this time, unprecedented distress, heightened because of this pandemic we're still dealing with. Responding to that is not babysitting anything. Responding to that in the hopes that those who are feeling that distress, that anxiety, are helped to be relieved from that distress and anxiety so that they can be autonomous, confident, masterful learners. Again, we have a side A and a side B able to come to agreement on that learning that's at the heart of the venture, the heart of the endeavor, whether it's math or reading or writing, all of it thinking, to do well in the world for oneself and others, to build community. All of that, we're all in agreement, is essential, is the reason why we exist. And what we're saying through this budget is that to look after just the basic needs that need to be met to be on this journey of learning and well-becoming. It's unprecedented. I've been in the board office since 2005. We've been a school division for 20 years. We've never had to go to surplus. We've never had to operationalize surplus to meet the needs that confront us. But because of very candid and brave conversations between trustees and a senior leadership team, we've resolved this needs to be done for 23-24. We have no choice. But the message has to be clear. I want to reiterate the message the vice chair has shared this evening, the secretary treasurer has shared this evening. It's unprecedented. It has to remain unprecedented. This cannot become the way of doing business. The message has to be clear. We need to see more funding. And I remain hopeful that with a campaign started a few weeks ago around student attendance and engagement, a provincial campaign that acknowledges we are seeing unprecedented disengagement and absences from school. We need to do something. Will come in the budget later in March, more money to support that in schools. Yesterday, I spent the lunch hour listening to a presentation about poverty, the impacts of poverty in schools. And we're going to soon see, it's already been released, a campaign around poverty, young people living in poverty, and how that impacts their learning and well-becoming in schools. And here again, I'm hopeful that later this month, when more budget announcements come, when a provincial budget for all sectors is made public, we'll see more funding to address the inequities that we're saying in our budget need to be addressed, whether that funding is coming or not. All right, so on that note, I'm going to pass it over to our chair, Sandy Nemeth.
Thank you, Christian, Jamie and Chris. So we've shared a lot with you. We've shared a lot of numbers. We've shared a lot of angst that is sort of permeating not just Louis Riel, but divisions across the province. We hope that you have a very good sense now of how fortunate we are and how courageous your board and senior leadership team is being in conversations and debates and dialogue around how we navigate funding that had the potential, if we didn't dip into surplus, to really have an astronomical effect, the wrong direction in where we were heading for the next year. And I want to tell you that your school board really didn't bat an eye when it came to deciding that there was no room for going backwards, that we had to do everything that we could, and that meant taking money out of a surplus that traditionally has provided all sorts of extras that normally the province wouldn't fund, and the money was used gratefully and strategically to do that. But there was no option for going backwards. We wanted to see Aspire in place and grow. We wanted to see the right number of teachers in our classrooms. We wanted to see the clinical supports and services that our teachers and staff or administrators, that our students, some of who are here with us tonight and who I neglected to welcome, but you are so very welcome this evening, are telling us are critical and important. They were critical and important 10 years ago. They're critical and important now, and they're going to be as we come out of a pandemic, as we work to recovery learning, as we continue to try and support wellness and encourage wellness and well-becoming throughout the division for everyone, for our students, for their families, for our staff, for our teachers, and for those of you who lead in our school and lead at our board office every day, every weekend, every month, all year long. So the financial stewardship, and that was the perfect word that was used, that money that we've been saving for 20 years since we were a brand new baby school division, this is the time when all of that is paying off. And I'm going to invite all of you, as I have invited my board colleagues, to stick with us on this. It is not sustainable and it is not good, but we're going to start educating folks, and we're going to start asking hard questions, and we're going to share lots and lots and lots of information. And I'm hoping that you'll all stick with us for that journey. We do want to answer any questions you might have, but we also know that you've been sitting for an hour. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. Use that time, please, to go for a walk, to grab some cookies or coffee, to chat amongst yourselves about what you heard tonight and what questions that might compel in your mind. And we'll regroup in about 10 minutes time. Thanks.
Now that I've spoken, I can have good job. Thanks. Good job. Everybody.
Tough press.
Hey, how you doing?
You know, you got it, my
Yeah.
Andrew Smith. Just wades into all this.
And
you know.
why quitting is.
Given all the new home construction and commercial development in this area, I don't understand how that can remain flat and still not meet some of the requirements. The other, I guess, part two to that would be, I know the provincial contribution has been going down percentage-wise steadily since 2016. We know that, we see that in the drain document. From what I understand and what I saw here today, you're at 50% provincial funding, 15% special levy. My understanding of that correctly. So that's two questions.
Okay. Jamie, do you want to tackle these ones? Thank you. Do you want to slide back up or no?
Yeah, sure.
And how are we
So
going backwards?
to answer the first question in regards to the special requirement, that's the school taxes that are levied on
Okay.
it's right there. Oh, that's okay.
No, sorry.
There we go.
There we go. Sorry. Sorry, what was I saying? Okay, so for the special levy, this levy is capped on the entire sector of the division. So regardless if there are additional housing starts, regardless if housing prices go up or down, we are bound by, or we are strongly recommended by the provincial government to hold that rate the same. And so what ends up happening is the mill rates go down to essentially come up with the same value spread over the entire population. So I was actually looking at this morning, and when you compare the special requirement for a taxpayer going 5 years to today, and if their property values have remained identical, they would actually be experiencing close to $160 of tax savings on their property. And so those are dollars that we cannot capture or recapture through taxation, essentially. As for your second question, you'll notice that you had mentioned that the split between funding for the special requirement and the provincial funding of schools is about 50-50. I'd have to go back to the numbers, but it's very close to that. Yeah, it's very close. And the reason for that is because the special requirement has been held constant, the same for the past 3 or 4 years now. And in lieu of having that ability to increase our mill rates or tax the base in our community, we get what's called the property tax offset grant, which is a value that's increased by 2% every year. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. I just want people to realize that how much that special levy now is coming really important to school division budgets more so than ever before.
Yeah, and there is lost revenue by capping that special requirement because as you have indicated, we cannot capture the increase in housing starts or the increase in valuation of properties in the area.
Thanks. Was there another question? Yep. Yeah, you just as well. Hey, Andrew.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Smith, MLA for Elijah Modi, and from the government side, so I'd just like to ask a question. First of all, I appreciate in-person event like this to be able to have a good discussion about the budget. Now, we talked about, I guess, predictable funding on a go-forward basis. I know having been involved in the budget process at the provincial level, I know some of our colleagues at the federal level have the same problem. You know, there's not a lot of predictability going forward. Inflation, we're not sure what the future that's going to look like. Just curious what kind of perhaps markers would be in place to give us an idea of what that might look like, what actual predictable funding would look like, given the fact that it's very uncertain what's happening. I know just recently there's been an $8 million plus increase to the provision. I think it's about 8.4% increase. I know that it's certainly not an easy time right now despite the increase. I think every government is running, the federal and provincial governments running deficits. Understand that you're in a very difficult situation. We all are after COVID. Wondering what that would look like, what kind of metrics you'd have to understand what a go-forward basis, what predictability would look like. Just for me as the MLA that represents an area and the Riel School Division, and of course as the father of a 4-year-old, I'm very curious what that would look like and what I can take back.
So I'm just going to comment briefly and then Jamie can comment a little bit more. For us as a board, the rate of inflation has had a massive impact this year. So I would say that there's one marker right there. And that really spreads itself not just throughout public education, but a whole bunch of other sectors in the province. And you know, you've alluded to that in the past. The other part is there's a whole bunch of expertise that exists in school divisions that can provide you the dollars that are needed now, like today, around infrastructure deficits, around transportation deficits. An example of that would be what's happening in Pembina Trails, where they're rejigging their bus fleet in order to, you know, they're staggering start times at schools because the division is growing so fast. They have to do that in order to make sure that kids are getting to school and then getting home at the end of the day. So it's a whole bunch of things, and you know a lot of this because you've been very engaged, and we've had, you know, as a division, lots of conversation with you that we appreciate. But those are the parts about getting kids to school and making sure the schools are good, are sound places for them to be. The other pieces are around some of the other things we heard about tonight, which is poverty, and the fact that Manitoba now has the highest number of students that are living in poverty, and that's not news. We've had that distinction for quite some time. So it is all the things that education navigates all the time, but that is so connected with other areas, and hence the need for all the clinical supports and that we are asking for and that we are continuing to invest in. So a dollar figure, I don't know, but those are the types of questions that we could, you know, that what we should be asking. And if we want to attach dollar figures, that would be very easy to do.
From a finance side of things, the first, I guess, nice have would be to have a multi-year budget so that we can plan out strategically some of the programming and supports in place. Dealing with the budget from year to year to year has some real operational consequences if that additional funding doesn't come through. So if you look on this slide, you'll see the 3 bottom numbers: one-time incremental cost pressure grant, strengthening student support and learning grant, which is a one-time special needs grant. These are one-time costs. So we've operationalized this, and we don't know in the following year whether these are truly one-time or whether they're actually baked into the formula going forward. So that level of uncertainty causes some real stressors in the system. The second thing is when we're given the provincial funding of schools program budget, so the budget that we received from the funding model or budget we received a couple of weeks ago from the province, those are not static amounts. Wow, once we're given that money, that doesn't mean we're actually going to get that money throughout the year. We get two adjustments throughout the year called an A2, an A1 and an A2, and those numbers could vastly differ. So for last year, I'll speak to 21-22. Our estimated budget actually got reduced by $1.5 million, which had real dollar consequences. This year, I'm still waiting for this year's adjustment, but I'm anticipating another $1 million loss in this year's budget that I'm going to have to find money for. And so thank goodness we have an ISP, an adult education budget that could cover some of these losses. So those are basically the two main areas, is a multi-year budget and a budget that once we get the number, make adjustments for enrollment, but not large swings, so it's more predictable. And the last thing is the dollar values that are assessed in each of the areas in the funding model. Those dollar values are based on enrollment or socioeconomic factors and the like. And those numbers have not changed in the past. At least I've been here 10 years, they haven't changed. So the funding for transportation hasn't changed in 10 years per pupil. The funding for special needs hasn't really changed per pupil. And so a lot of those factors need to start being adjusted for inflation and other factors. So that would be my takeaway if I was taking away something back to government.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I just want to check in online. Are there any questions online, Clark?
Yes, you too.
Okay.
First one is, what is the funding on a per student basis and how does it compare to previous years? Sure, that's somebody calculating your head.
Oh, if I carry the one, I don't have that information off the top of my head.
And-
Sorry. Yeah, we can post that in an infographic.
Okay.
When we release the budget.
Second question is from the same person, I believe, is what level of staff absenteeism is built into budgets? How will LRC manage this and also ensure sufficient substitute pools?
We have, built-in budget. We have a percentage that we allocate for absenteeism, and absenteeism is a broad range, whether it's due to sickness, maternity, paternity leave, discretionary days. And so we do have that built into the $186.5 million amount. So that contingency is factored in.
That was all the questions online?
So far, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from folks in the room? Yeah, make your way up to the microphone and tell us what's on your mind.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There are now 16 questions. I should.
Okay, well, I'm gonna let this young person ask their question and then.
So does the accountant have to show you how to count the questions?
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a student from Nelson McIntyre, and my question is, what do you say to parents, students, or teachers who say that they don't see the need for anti-racism and inclusion programs in our schools? Like, how would you explain to them that we actually need these programs?
Want to talk about one, Christian? From a
Sure.
high level?
Well, our overarching question this year is how do we prioritize belonging? I don't know if this question is a question that you've heard asked, but it's a question I've been wanting all of us to be asking in schools. So why that overarching question? Well, if I'm going to measure the impact of my work, the reason I get up every day and come to work, trying to improve the lives of students, trying to improve your life, I have to know who we're talking about. I need to know deeply who are the people in our schools, who are the kids, and how are the myriad of ways they identify, and how do they describe their lived experience, their needs. I've got to start there. And so in LRSD, at the heart of answering the question, are we making a difference? Are teachers making a difference in the lives of kids? Are EAs making a difference? We've started with this fundamental question of asking, who is LRSD? Who are we? And at the heart of that question is diversity, a rich diversity of who we are. Equity, the notion that each and every one of us is special. Each and every one of us deserves a future. Each and every one of us has amazing potential, amazing gifts. And what we observe to be injustice. For no fault of their own, people are suffering needlessly. Their gifts aren't being acknowledged. They're not able to offer the world their full potential. And that question, that essential question, is that everyone walking through the door needs to feel they belong, needs to feel they're a part of community. Inclusion is at the heart of it. If we're going to change anything, if we're going to improve the lives of students in our community. And it is, after all, a raison d'être. It's the reason a public school system exists. And so that's the answer I would offer someone who's saying not diversity. If not diversity, then what? Not equity. Are we suggesting inequity is the objective? Not inclusion. Are we saying some should be excluded, must be excluded?
Yes, thank you.
Does that work?
Absolutely, which
Okay.
is why I handed it to you and didn't go down that path on my own, because I knew that you would frame it perfectly. All right, 16 questions.
So I clarified, it's 2 more questions.
There's a lot of, I can, okay.
Yeah. Question.
You were muted for 5 minutes. And so
Yes.
the chat blew up because the people couldn't hear.
Oh.
16 chats.
16 chats.
Chat comments.
Okay.
2 questions.
Actually, too much.
Question number 1.
Oh,
It says here, were there any decisions made on what schools will provide a full day kindergarten days? Is that dependent on budget?
Actually, I think I might be able to answer this one. I'm
Oh, I
not
know, I
sure.
But you know what? No, it's because I realized that because we wanted to move this thing along. I remember now that I didn't get to side A. So I'm sorry about that. Right.
You did talk about that.
Well, but I didn't. I forgot to go a little deeper there. I got caught up on side B. I forgot to go deep with side A, saying they'd like to see full day K. So we have many in the school division that share my passion. It's my raison d'être. It's the one thing I wish we would do in Manitoba, like Ontarians have been able to do, like Quebecers are doing, British Columbians are doing. We can do it. Whereas we can do it. If they can do it, we can do it. And that is full day kindergarten. The DSFM is celebrating 30 years this year. The Francophones of Manitoba finally got self-governance in 1993. And my daughters went to a DSFM school. And I, as a parent, enjoyed full day kindergarten. because it was universal from the start in the DSFM. How is it that in 2023, 30 years later, we do not have universal full-day kindergarten in the province of Manitoba? And why is it that it's only 5-year-olds? Full-day kindergarten, 4 and 5-year-olds, like other provinces, like other jurisdictions in the world. Places where kids thrive, all kids thrive, and where the percentage of children in poverty aren't percentages we see here in Manitoba. Now, we can't do more than we've done. We've done all that we can. So we cannot move any further on full-day K. There are no coordinators and consultants in LRSD anymore. We eliminated that role and responsibility in order to add a little more full-day K last year onto the full-day K we'd started. We are telling community, this isn't a pilot anymore. It's not going away. We'll do all we can to protect what we have. But to go any further, we need government to step up. Government needs to get involved. It has to come from the province. Full-day K, universal, like in other provinces, for everyone, not just a select few.
Question 2?
And one more has popped up.
Okay.
And so it says, you were budgeting 2.7 million in revenues from the international student program. So they've done some math here saying that affords about 15 extra FTEs. How many students does that make up coming into the division?
Is piece to it? Sorry.
Do that thingy, Christian.
Oh,
Oh, I figured it out. Yeah, there we go. As you see from this slide here, we are estimating that our international student program revenue will be $3,060,000. And after staffing and supplies and services, we will have an estimated profit or income of $895,812. As I mentioned before, these dollars go into our accumulated surplus, and those dollars go towards, as Trustee Sigurdsson mentioned before, helping the facilities such as the cafeteria builds, the wireless that we have throughout the division, the infrastructure. Those are all paid for by accumulated surplus dollars. That being said, if there are identified needs in schools due to an influx of ISP students, we do allocate extra dollars out of those surpluses to address those needs. And so senior leadership team is always monitoring and assessing needs throughout the division and trying to address any instances where additional supports are needed.
Can you read the question again? I'm not sure that.
I think the question was actually getting towards how many students, international
Oh,
students.
the number of students is, for international students, it's budgeted on 300 students.
300, yeah.
Sorry, I forgot that part.
Question 3?
It's in addition to tapping into surplus, was there any cost measures made?
No.
Any other questions in the room or online?
There you go, Trustee.
Thank you. So on behalf of the school board and the senior leadership team, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. We are here for a few minutes if you've got questions that you would like to follow up on or thoughts that you would like to share. As always, I believe, was there one last slide here that was showing?
We've closed the thought exchange, so now folks want to let you know what they're thinking.
I was just gonna,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, do it that way for sure. With intent. Just wait, be gentle.
There it goes.
If you ever want to reach out, by all means, you can go to lrsd.net. The contact page, if you scroll down to the bottom, there'll be a link. You can share your thoughts your concerns, your comments, and we will certainly take all of them under consideration. The next step in the process for us as a board is to consider any feedback we get. We have to have our final budget into the province by March the 15th. So we have called a special meeting for March 14th, at which time we will pass the budget with any tweaks that we feel need to be made between now and then, although at this stage of the game, we're not really anticipating anything. So I wish you a good rest of the evening, safe drive home. Be well. Thanks.